Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video on the Business Idea Insight YouTube channel. I hope you're having a great day so far, and in today's video, we're going to be jumping right into how you can discover problems and ultimately develop that into a side business idea using the news. Now, a huge problem I know that people run into when they're thinking of their side business idea is, where do they start? And I think the perfect place to start is where you should start with a problem and solving a problem, as all businesses are based on actually solving a problem and filling a need for a specific group of people, and to add value to that group, so you can ultimately solve that problem for them. So in today's video, we're going to be diving into an exercise that you can do to how you can find problems from the news, and then how you can take that problem, implement the side business idea equation, ultimately to think of a side business idea. So the first step for this exercise is finding reputable news sources that we trust, that we can use to ultimately read and find problems that we can solve. Now, if you don't have any reputable news sources that you know of, I've got a few here that I want to share with you, and they include the Wall Street Journal, CBC, Reuters, the BBC, and the New York Times. And in your local area, there may even be local news sources that are much more reputable than the ones I've listed, and you should go to these first before checking out the ones I've listed here, as your local news sources will have an area that can tap into the local community to really understand those groups and talk to them and present their problems and challenges in the news, like many news channels and articles do. So choosing a reputable and reliable news source is extremely important. If you choose a news source that you can't actually rely on, or that produces misinformation or publishes data that's inaccurate, you could be ultimately basing your side business idea problem on something that's not real, is false, or inaccurate altogether. And this could lead you down to a path of failure, as you're basing a key piece of your side business idea off something that could be incorrect. So it's very important you follow reputable news sources, as this is the first piece of the equation that is going to lead to the success of your business idea. And so if you're using inaccurate information to define that problem and that group of people, down the road when you go to solve that problem, you're going to find it extremely difficult to actually find people that need that problem solved, and you'll end up wasting a lot of time. So I advise you to use one of the news sources I listed, or find a really reputable news source in your local area that you trust. The next piece in step one is to choose an industry. And this is going to be very, very important, as it will help you narrow down the types of business ideas you'll be thinking of, and will also help you narrow down the types of problems you'll need to be looking for within this exercise, so you can quickly move on to find a solution for this problem you're looking for. So you'll want to start by narrowing down the industry you're looking to enter. And to do this, you don't really need to make it complicated by doing a bunch of industry analysis, etc. You'll want to make sure the industry is growing. So you won't want to choose an industry that's in steep decline, as you'll run out of business one day if you launch a business in that area for only the market to run right into the ground. So you'll generally want to choose a market or an industry that is growing, and you'll also, which is really important here, is choosing an industry you're passionate about. Now, a huge reason that side businesses and even full-time businesses fail is because the business owners simply shut it down when they weren't making enough money, or they didn't see the success and goals reached quick enough. And this could totally be avoided if you start a side business in an industry you're passionate about, as you'll be able to work harder to reach those goals, or you'll be able to persist in the industry longer because you're passionate about what you're doing. So you can make a list of about 3 to 5 industries you're passionate about, ones that are growing, and ones that you have skills and knowledge in. So that way you have a complete array of some industries you can choose from going forward into step 2 of this exercise, which I'll explain later. So now, before we finish up step 1 here, you'll want to choose 5 to 10 articles and news stories within those industries that you've specified. And it's okay to pick a few articles for each industry, as this will give you an array of different potential problems you can solve and an array of ideas you can come up with, so you have a great list of side businesses to potentially move forward with. So that's it for step 1. You'll want to make sure you're using a reputable news source. You're choosing an industry to narrow down the types of articles and problems we can go over, and then you're going to choose some articles and news stories within those industries that you're passionate about and have skills for. So let's move on to step 2. So in step 2 here, we're going to be defining those types of articles that we simply selected from those news sources. And we're going to be defining the articles in 2 ways. They'll either be informational or they'll be problem-based. And we do this so we don't waste any time trying to develop a solution for an article that's simply presenting information. For instance, with the first type, informational-based article, you'll generally have information that's released. Maybe it's original research, maybe it's an announcement from a company, or maybe it's an invention, a new technology, etc. But basically, this is just information that is being released to the world. They just want people to know about it, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with a problem here. You see, it's key we determine these types of articles so we know and we don't waste our time trying to develop a solution for an informational-based article when we really should be spending our time developing solutions for the problem-based articles. Informational-based articles can still be an amazing way to think of business ideas, and I'll touch on that in a later video, but this time we're focusing specifically on problem-based articles. So you'll want to go and define what ones are informational-based and what ones are problem-based. Problem-based articles generally are discussed about a small group or even a large group of people, and you can clearly see that they're facing a problem. For instance, if you live in North America, you could have seen the articles around problems with traffic. These are huge problems in many areas of North America. And this information presented in the article wasn't necessarily based on, how much traffic there was and how much it's growing. It's really just presenting the problem that there is way too much traffic in these certain cities and it's causing some serious issues. So you'll want to go through and make that distinction for each of the articles you have, and then you can scrap the informational-based articles that you've chosen, so you're left with a narrow list of problem-based articles for those specific industries. So now that you've removed those informational articles and we're left with the problem-based articles and by industry, we'll want to actually define the very specific problem and what group of people it's affecting within those articles. So I'm going to show you examples live how to do this. But basically, just so you know, you'll want to find the group of people it's affecting and what is the exact problem. Now, there can be multiple problems in certain articles, so you'll want to pinpoint the global problem or the problem that is the largest and that's affecting the largest group of people. And if there's multiple different groups that it's affecting, you can write each of those out, but circle the biggest group that it's affecting, as this will be the most likely target market you'll want to be going after to solve this problem, and it's the largest market that we should make note of here too. What is up, guys? So here I'm going to show you live how you can actually find problems to solve from the news using the exact process I just showed you, and so you can have a hands-on example of how to do this. Finding problems is so important. They're fundamental to your side business and generating money, and so I really just wanted to show you guys how to do this yourself, as it can be sometimes hard to understand what exactly I'm talking about with the informational and problem-based articles, how to extract those problems, and then how to take that problem and put it into the side business idea equation and method that I developed, ultimately to help you think of that side business idea you can go and launch for that local area or that on that national level, depending what type of problem you found. So let's jump in here. I'm just sharing my screen here. And so basically, I'm just over at the Wall Street Journal website. And as you can see, they got a bunch of news articles. A lot of this was probably updated today or very recently, like 13 minutes ago, 36 minutes ago. So as you can see, there's a lot of awesome and recent news stuff that we can check out. So I was able to pick out some articles for you guys here. A recent one about the McDonald's CEO being fired over a relationship with his employee. So this is an informational-based article, as although there is a problem of possibly a relationship going on with McDonald's CEO and an employee, it doesn't really present a problem that is affecting a group of people like we talked about. So basically, this is just expressing information that some people may find interesting. And there is really no problem here. So if you chose one of these articles related to business and food and safety, then this is one you could probably scrap and move to the side, as it's more informational based. So you can see what I'm saying here when I talk about problem based versus informational based.
it's pretty clear. Sometimes it's not always very clear, but it's usually pretty clear on, who it's affecting, what the problem is, etc. The next news source I wanted to move on to is Reuters, as I promoted that earlier. And a global problem that I found, and not really related to my local area, was this issue of smog in India. Now, this does go on to talk about, there's new levels of smog being reached, a lot of information in this article, but it's really talking about a problem, and that problem being a huge and ridiculous amount of smog within India's capitals and other cities that are really negatively affecting the population. And so in an article like this, you can see that the key group here is people that live in New Delhi, probably right in the central city, and may not have access to the levels of healthcare that maybe some of the more rich people do in this area. And thus they're facing the problem of having to deal with this smog and potentially have severe health concerns due to this and the pollution. So this is another problem-based article and another great example here. The next is going to go over to the New York Times here. And this is the studies yielding impressive results in a fight against cystic fibrosis. So this article from the New York Times, this one is clearly an informational-based article. Although they're talking about the problem of cystic fibrosis, I'd say this one is very more informational based, as they're talking about new scientific studies, an editorial that was published that had findings that ultimately is going to lead to potential help and results in fighting against cystic fibrosis. So this one's clearly informational based. Now this one's a bit different. This one's an opinion and a story about people who have their spouses who die and are then left, being quite alone. And this is a problem for that group of people, as being alone is something no one wants to be. And so this article goes on to describe, how maybe one person could be the cook in the household, and when they pass, it's very unfortunate for the other person. So as you can see, it's really pinpointing a group of people, people that have had a spouse or loved one die that ultimately provides for them. And they're having a massive pain and problem of not knowing how to cope with that, not knowing how to be alone, not knowing how to fend for themselves or even cook dinner for themselves. So this is clearly a problem-based article that is affecting a clear group of people here. And the last one I want to show you was from the CBC here. This is one of my favorites, as it's really applicable to Canada and especially British Columbia, where I live. And this one is talking about how hospital patients in Canada are lacking the need or lacking access to interpreters to interpret their English and other languages they speak. And so this is obviously becoming a problem as the article is presenting. But clearly here it's talking about a problem for a specific group of people that can't necessarily speak clear and proper English all the time. And so the article goes on to discuss this, but as you can see, it's clearly a problem-based article affecting a clear group of people. This could potentially be an informational-based article if they left out the lacking part of patients. If they presented this article as this is the number of interpreters based per hospital, that would be more of an informational-based article, as we're gathering more information of just the interpreters per hospital, and not actually diving into the problem here is that there isn't actually enough interpreters to go around for all the people that don't necessarily speak clear English. So as you can see, guys, there's a wide range of news outlets and news sources you can go to find these problem-based articles. And determining what ones are problem-based and what ones are informational-based isn't always super easy, but as you can see, it's not very hard, and you can really find some awesome problem-based articles both for your local area like I did for British Columbia, or the global area like we saw with India and the capital having significant problems with smog there. So as you can see, this is a really great exercise that you can conduct just right from the comfort of your computer. You don't have to go out and make any calls to anyone or anything like that. You can come home after you've worked your 9-to-5 day job and you may be tired. So this is a perfect exercise. You can hop on the couch, open up your laptop, and choose your favorite news source. Maybe you'll educate yourself for the day on some news topics and ultimately find a problem to solve. Now, one thing I quickly want to touch on here is that I didn't specifically choose industries, and that was more to keep this wide open. I didn't want to choose a specific industry or a couple and have a few of you who aren't choosing those industries be confused about how this works. So really, if you're going to apply that piece, you simply just choose the industry in that news source and news websites area in their drop-down or tab menu, and then you can go from there finding the informational or problem-based articles.
So once you've defined the problem and the specific market that it could be targeting in the group of people, then we're going to move on to step 3 here, and that's actually implementing these problems into the side business idea equation. And if you haven't checked out the side business idea equation, this is basically a proprietary methodology that I developed to help people just like you develop a side business that solves a real problem, is one you can launch with the value, skills, and knowledge you have, and has a business model and system for delivering that value and getting that money back in exchange. So you have an operational side business. And so basically what we can do here is break down the side business equation, use the problems we found from the news, and plug that into the side business equation into the problem section. You see, then we've mapped out the problem we want to define using the news, and simply to develop a solution now, you're going to go along and use the rest of the side business idea equation. So that will involve taking account for the value you can bring, as well as using the service-based business model to tie this all together into a side business idea that is solving a problem for your local area that you've discovered from the news. So if you're needing help with how to implement the side business equation along with this piece and this exercise, you can check out a link in the description for a full video on how the side business equation works. So I really love this exercise because all these news outlets and channels and websites out there, they're constantly putting out new news almost by the minute these days. So this can give us a constant inflow of potential problems that we can solve for a side business and that we can look at and evaluate for a local market or even a national market or even on a global scale. There's really news for all different levels, and this exercise can be applied to all those different levels, news channels, local areas to global areas, as long as you're using reputable news sources and you're actually picking out the problems and the groups within those news articles and stories. So this can be a really great way to find problems, and make sure you, once you've found that problem, you implement it using the side business idea equation and method that we talked about earlier. You can find the full video of that in the description below, and I know this exercise is really going to help you guys. So you should right now go check out your favorite news source and see if you can find some problems and see how you can implement it. And so if you want more exercises just like this or a more in-depth guide for finding business ideas from the news, you can check out the Finding the Fit ebook, which is an original ebook I've written to help you, the 9-to-5 worker, actually develop a side business idea you can launch and get unstuck. So you can check that out in the link in the description in the bio. Otherwise, I hope to see you guys next time.